it is a concern because there is a question of accountability, who is taking decision. There is intrinsic logic in what Prime Minister Netanyahu did when both the former chief of staff that were members of the war cabinet, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, that acted as the responsible adults, together with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, they left last week. The demand from the far right to replace them was unacceptable to Netanyahu. He knows what are their demands, and he probably doesn't want to share with them even some of the information that he gets as the prime minister. They want to reoccupy completely Gaza. They want to stop the humanitarian aid, and they want to build settlements. So the last thing, while you conduct a war, you need such extreme views in the war cabinet. So alternatively, he will consult whoever, Prime Minister Netanyahu, whoever he sees fit. But from in the middle of the war, not having ministers, other elected politicians in the war cabinet is a source of great concern.
It's also quite puzzling, what happened over the weekend. The military were pausing fighting, but Benjamin Netanyahu didn't even seem to know about it. Is there a sense of chaos at the moment?
Yeah, well, Netanyahu says he didn't know. It doesn't mean he didn't know. He says it because he tried to appease too many people at the same time that it can actually reconcile with their views. So on the one hand, the military, the international community put pressure on him to allow more humanitarian aid, considering the humanitarian disaster inside Gaza. So to allow the route from Kerem Shalom, the entrance, the crossing of Kerem Shalom through the Salah ad-Din route to the south of Gaza. It makes sense. It's necessary, it's urgent. But at the same time, the far right ask him actually stop all the humanitarian aid. That's the way to fight a war. Starve the population. The military says that's exactly what brought us to The Hague, and in the indictment, at least the charges by the ICC. So with this pressure, it tells one thing: the military, all right, stop the war for a short while, let humanitarian aid enter into Gaza, make sure that they are safe, because we saw that there were many humanitarian aid workers died in this war. But at the same time, it tells his coalition partners, I didn't know. This is Netanyahu tricks all along.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Is the pause that's going to be held now every day, is it going to be enough to get the sort of aid that is required when we see the humanitarian disaster that is playing out?
It probably won't be enough. You need around, according to UNRWA and another humanitarian organization, around 600 trucks every day. If it's only a short period of every day that there is a stop in the war, probably it's not enough, and the pressure will mount. At the end of the day, Netanyahu got used that he tells his story to different people, different stories, but eventually in the age of modern media that everyone talks to everyone and all different platforms, it just won't work. So the question, now that he's leading a very narrow coalition and he is basically held hostage almost, sorry to using this term, by the far right, he probably eventually do more than they want, what is right for Israel, for the relations with the international community, and first and foremost, what is right for the people of Gaza that suffer immensely.
Yeah. But at the same time, to your point with this pressure from the far right, we've seen Israeli settlers, illegal Israeli settlers, ransacking Palestinian homes and almost nothing being done to stop it.
Yeah, this is an additional. The far right now, that many of them, it's not just far right, those are messianic religious settlers, that they think this is their time and they can do whatever they like. And they operate outside the law, and for years, those who were supposed to enforce the law actually protected them while they were attacking settlers. And it's only recently that the international community starts imposing sanctions of them, but very slowly indeed. So that's a major issue. However you look at the situation, Israel needs election urgently, change of government. If it continues like this, there is a real fear. The hostages won't come home, the war will never end, and Israel might end as a pariah state. As long as it is in the hands of the far right, there is a real danger of it. It's not a new government. They can think about the day after, an exit strategy, dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian issue in a holistic way. But this is not the government. You can't have a prime minister that is a defendant in corruption trial while is blackmailed by the far right.
Yeah. So do you think that we might see a real uptick in those protesters coming out onto the streets and really, forcing Netanyahu's hand and maybe forcing him to resign?
So we saw already, this protest that before October 7 attracted hundreds of thousands of people, stopped for a few months, and they're back and they gather momentum. The Israeli society is divided, and that's exactly where people like Netanyahu, who is at the end of the day right-wing populist, they where he thrives, on the divisions within the Israeli society. So he wants to drive even further wedge between the different segments of the Israeli society. But, at the end of the day, Israelis realize 8 months into the war, the idea that there is a victory and elimination of Hamas doesn't happen. The hostages are not coming back home, and most Israelis would like to see hostages returning home. And the economy is in a terrible state. The society is divided. So more and more people probably will take the streets and find other ways within civil society to put more and more pressure for fresh election.
Always great to get your thoughts on things. Yossi, just a very interesting day. Good to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.